Welcome to the world of Knits Cool. This video will teach you how to knit this super trendy headband using our new post knitting method. Our Knits Cool studio uses simple vertical posts, so there are no needles to hold. It's easy and fun, and you won't get tangled up in knitting needles ever again. For this project, you will need the Knits Cool studio with all of its components and 20 yards of yarn. We will be using the pink yarn that comes with the studio. First, select your medium Knits Cool posts and insert them into the holes in the studio. Make sure you hear them click in. Casting on. To cast on, make a slip knot. It's like making a knot, but not pulling the tail all the way through. Once you've made your slip knot, insert the loop onto the right post. Tighten the loop until it's snug. Make sure your yarn is looped through the yarn holder. This is super important because it keeps your yarn towards the back and helps you make perfect stitches. Okay, let's cast on stitches. Make a loop with the yarn and slip it onto the post. You can tighten it a little so it's snug. You now have 2 stitches cast on. Continue making loops until you have 7 stitches on the right post. How easy was that? Knitting rows. Remove the first stitch from the right post and pull the yarn through it. This makes a new loop, and then you just pop it onto the left post. Tighten it up a little by pulling on the yarn. Now, take the next stitch from the right post and pull the yarn through it and place it onto the left post again. So now you keep doing this until all the stitches are knit onto the left post and there are no more stitches on the right post. Keep in mind that this row is the most fiddly, as your first stitches are just twisted loops and not fully formed yet. After this, your stitches will be a breeze to knit. Awesome! You have now knit 1 row. Check your row counter to make sure that the button is set to 1. So now, knit all of these stitches back onto the right post. You have now knit 2 rows. Now you can click to number 2. Now keep in mind, at this point, you're probably thinking, my stitches look wrong and nothing like knitted fabric. But actually, this is the way they're supposed to look. A little messy looking. So don't worry, just keep going. Once your knitting starts to grow, you'll see your work looking more and more like a knitted design. All right, let's continue knitting back and forth. Okay, now that you have finished knitting, your project should look like this. Casting off. Now let's cast off. This is super simple and fun. Knit 2 stitches onto the opposite post. By now, you should be a pro at knitting your stitches. Then simply grab the bottom stitch and slip it over the top stitch, and let it go. Next, knit another stitch onto the post. So now you have 2 stitches on this post again. Grab the bottom stitch and slip it over the top stitch. Keep doing this until you have only 1 remaining stitch on the post. Now take this 1 stitch with your project off the post completely and thread the tail through the loop. And tighten. You should have a neat finished edge like this. Finishing your headband. The first thing you are going to do is take your sewing needle that comes with the studio and thread the yarn through the tail end. Next, fold your headband in half with the end edges facing each other. Take your sewing needle and insert into a few loops on both sides of the headband. Now don't worry about exactly which loops to sew, as long as you catch some loops on each side and that they are somewhat across from each other. Continue sewing this seam until you reach the other side. To add this gather, simply take the remaining yarn and wrap it around the seam you just sewed. Now that you've finished wrapping, you'll have to tie a knot to keep the wrapped area from unraveling. So a good tip I like to tell people is to tie the knot on the back side of your work so it doesn't show. And before you cut the yarn, I like to hide my ends by weaving them off to the side so they aren't poking out. Just weave them through a few stitches. Then cut close, but making sure you don't clip the headband stitches. Now before you finish, if you plan on adding any charms onto your headband, make sure you leave at least a foot or two of the yarn for that part. Then thread your charm and position it at the center of the headband. So now, tie a double knot to secure it. You can then clip your threads, or if you're a perfectionist, you can hide your ends by threading them off to the side first. I'm just going to clip mine. So that's it. Congratulations! You just made your first Knits Cool boho headband.